Okay, hi to everybody as you join us. Just to let you know, we're going to observe the 2-minute silence commencing now, so I shall stop talking. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our Jump webinars. And I am absolutely thrilled and delighted that this week we're joined by Jules and Katie of the Ting Tings. And as you guys will know, we've been putting out an awful lot of publicity about the guys joining us today. Good friends of mine. I'm thrilled to bits that they're able to come on and talk to us about their careers, and boy, have they got an interesting story to tell us. We're incredibly fortunate to have Jules and Katie alongside us today. It's going to be a very interesting and entertaining hour in front of us. You might have asked yourselves as you were thinking about coming onto the webinar, you know, what could a world famous indie band talk to us about in terms of the recruitment business? So what is it that they could pass on in terms of their knowledge? Well, I can tell you they can teach us a great deal about how to build a massive following, how to adapt to change. Indeed, I would sort of say be the vanguard of change, how to seriously engage an audience, making brave, very courageous decisions as you're going to be hearing during the next hour, deciding on who to appeal to in terms of audience and entirely who to distance. So it's also about, and they're going to talk about it, how to refine and redefine a fan base or followers, their pricing models, particularly in the early days around ticket prices, how it's so important to stand up for your principles and beliefs. I know that the guys will really talk about that, and often in the face of very strong and powerful opposition. It's about staying true to yourself. It's about embracing risk and enjoying the journey, which the guys have certainly done, and taking control of your own destiny. They're going to talk about technology, how to use that effectively. It's got great resonance for us in our industry, how to market your product on a very tight budget, especially in those early days, and indeed even recently, because the guys will talk about developing their own record business, their own publishing business, how to use social media absolutely brilliantly, being consistent, consistently refreshing your product and image, and always moving forward, even when at times moving forward to an extent felt like sort of going backwards. So I'm going to really just get straight into this and introduce you to Jules and Katie. And I'm going to ask them to just tell us a little bit about how they first met, really. What was the beginning like, guys?
Hi, everybody. My name's Jules. It's Katie. We're sitting here in front of a big screen, trying to make this as enjoyable as possible. It'd be great if we all were in a room, but obviously the whole COVID thing is setting everybody miles apart. So I wish everyone well through that, through this unprecedented times. Me and Katie met, wow, that's a while back now.
18 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah, about 18 years ago. We both met in London, actually, in separate little bands, projects, if you want, trying it out, trying to get things together. And I guess the quick way to that, it was we both didn't like what we were doing in our little bands, in our little projects. And it's like anything, you're just trying to find a way through, find a better way to do things. And I guess we found that in each other. We were both influenced by a band called Portishead at the time, which united us in the studios that we were hanging out in. And I guess what we tried to do, we sneaked out of our projects and bands that we were in to try to create a little Portishead vibe band ourselves. And it really started from there, like 18 odd years ago. That's how we met in London briefly.
And you guys really sort of got it together in Manchester, really. That's where it all started for you, wasn't it? Because Jules, you moved up to Manchester, and from my understanding, you guys met up there, and this is where the whole sort of magic began.
Yeah, I mean, like Jules said, we met in London, but then Jules moved down to Manchester, and we got in touch again. And then we both moved to a place called Islington Mill, which was like a disused cotton mill in Salford. Which had like 40 artist live workspaces there. And so it was really cheap in rent, really inspiring place to be as a band. We set up our studio and just surrounded ourselves with creativity, really.
I think, you said you started with an early band. I mean, you were somebody else before the Ting Tings, weren't you?
Yeah, there was a band called Dear Eskimo. There was myself, Jules, and another guy in the band, Simon. There was three of us, and we were, just trying to get ourselves moving as musicians, really, doing shows. I think we was playing like in the City, which was like a Manchester music conference. And at that conference, we actually got offered a small record deal with Mercury Records, which is part of Universal. So we got signed in a band previous to the Ting Tings, and then we sat on that record label for about a year. And we wrote and recorded everything ourselves. So we was, trying to make our album. And in the midst of that, the two guys that were on the label got sacked. And so the people whose kind of babies we were, that felt very proud that they'd found us, had just kind of, disappeared. And we sat on that label for about another 6 months before we got dropped. Yeah. And then 2 or 3 months later, we started the Ting Tings. And, something that was actually quite really depressing and quite soul destroying at the time was almost the impetus to get us moving and start our band up, really.
So we were talking about this, weren't we, last week, Jules? And you were saying, both of you were saying, you put all your passion into that early band, and kind of trying to let go and start something brand new was just painful. Just to sort of say, like, we're just going to finish, we're going to do this something else. What sort of brought you to that point where you felt enough's enough? Let's kick on. Let's do something completely different.
Well, in hindsight, hindsight's a beautiful thing. So it's very hard to go back to that exact time and feel it as emotional because we've moved on since then. But when we look at everything, I think it's a really hard thing when or in our business, when you're being creative or you're trying to do any form of output, whatever your business is, and you're dealing with something that you're passionate about, you're focused on, that you believe in. And then there's a survival instinct of how are we going to pay rent or how are we going to feed ourselves this week. So there's that commercial value to anything anyone does of, paints a picture. Does he put it on the wall? Does he look for feedback? Does he look for, income? Does he look to survive commercially within that art form? So I think the answer to that question is that when we first got a record deal, we were skeptical because we'd heard so many stories about, getting a record deal and what it meant and how some of your liberties were taken away as an artist because record companies just want to make money, generally. They develop artists, they say, and there is an element of truth in that, but it's a battle. So the answer to your question, going back to that, how did we feel? I think it was a learning curve. I think, in truth, we were very proud to sign to Mercury Records because our ego wanted to tell the world that we were good enough to get a record contract. But I think during having that record, in the time we had that record contract, I think we learned very quickly that it was actually worthless because it still was about what we were doing and the motivation, direction, and the kind of energy that we had that would get it across the line if there's such a thing. So I think it was a kind of relief in a way that
excuse me, 1 minute. We've got a little beautiful person having a meltdown.
Sorry, knew that was going to happen. So yeah, so it was kind of like a big relief to get to the end of that first commercial contract with a record label, because it meant that we could, it wasn't justifying, but it meant that we could actually start again back to what we believed in a year before, when we had that, before we had that record, where it was all about that energy, that focus, and that discipline within the two of us to get things done. If you over rely upon somebody that promises you something, do you know what I mean? If you over rely upon the third party saying, don't worry, we've got it covered. Yeah. Sometimes it's not making an excuse here. I mean, we may not have been good enough. Don't get me wrong. It's like, there's a whole load of things here, but sometimes it kind of detracts away from the amount of work and push that you do need to have to take something across that line. There are no quick answers to success. You really got to put yourself there and work hard at it. So it was a big relief getting to the end of that first deal, because it put us back into the game in many ways. It was like that we were back into sort of like that. It's almost like in football when you're trying to get on in the team, you really work hard to get on the team, and sometimes being in the team you can sort of drop off a little bit, but you really want to get on that team. It felt like that we were back in that game.
So Jules, I mean, when you were thinking about, when you started out, what was your ambition? What was your sort of vision? How did it? You become a global brand. It's hard to believe that you kind of thought back in those early days that's where you'd end up. What was when you sat down, the pair of you, in those early days, where did you want to be? What was your sort of view about where you would be in 2 or 3 years on from that position?
Well, initially, any budding musician in my game wants to be a superstar, wants to be able to tour the world and play stages all around the world. I'm not going to deny that. There's got to be a certain amount of ego attached to what we do to want to get on that stage. So I'm really not going to deny that. It's part of the parcel, really. But me and Katie are what I call creative musicians. We spend most of our time in the creative more than in the kind of promotion world. That's the kind of developing the song, recording the song, rehearsing on stage. We really enjoy that side of this industry. There's another side to the industry which is really important, which is promoting, which is a little bit more about doing interviews and doing, publicity and red carpets or whatever it is. And it kind of goes hand in hand. You want that publicity because you need to sell your records. Well, we always really focused on the creative, because our belief was always that if you do good work, if you really make some honest, heartfelt music, and we go through a process, we're very kind of deconstructive about what we do. If it does not wake us up in the morning and make us feel like this is really, integral to what our day's about, it often doesn't get there. It doesn't matter how much money or record companies or people around us saying it's brilliant. If we don't wake up in the morning going like, this really means something. Yeah. And that's always been the under kind of current or underflow of me and Katie. If it doesn't honestly feel like we're honestly doing the right thing, yeah, it never gets there. And I think with most work, you may have a good year. You can fake it. You can make things look pretty, especially online. You can tart them up as much as you want in any shape or form, but they don't run that long if it's not right from your soul, if it's not really, really coming from that right place.
So you've got to be passionate, as you say. You've really got to believe in yourself. It's got to come from the heart, right? I mean, otherwise it just doesn't, it's fake, can't make it work. And I guess that leads me into a question about, especially in the early days when you had a very tight budget, how did you get the name out there? How did you get the branding moving? How did you publicize your business, as it were, your band?
Well, first and foremost, by being honest. Really, really by being honest about what we do. So, for example, back then we was working with a different platform to what they have today. Like we were doing MySpace. That was the kind of equivalent to, and not as big as Instagram and Facebook or whatever is now the main social media platforms. And we were doing our parties in our warehouse up in Manchester that we used to live in. We were honestly making music from our hearts. We really believed that what we were doing is fresh. We were throwing house parties. And, you know, when we could, we were inviting people to those parties that were writing, like NME at the time, or a load of other little magazines or fanzines in Manchester. We were getting them to come to our parties and getting them drunk, hoping that they'd believe in our little movement that we were kind of, you know, brewing up. That's really kind of like the core of everything we did, was the honesty of it. It really was the honesty about
your early followers, though, Jules. I mean, you were getting people that were getting passionate about what you were doing as you were. You were getting that early people that were devotees.
Yeah. So you know, you look at what tools you've got, which was MySpace at the time, and a camera that we had. So we start creating imagery. We've got our music, because that's what we're there writing and recording our music, right? We're gifted to be able to make music. We had our belief, and then we're kind of throwing imageries about artists that we love, art that we love. We were surrounded by some great art up in Islington Mill in Manchester. And then me and Kate were creating imagery, and then we were putting it up on MySpace, and we were like creating a picture, and we were hitting our music, and we weren't conforming to any other kind of thing that was going on at the time. There was loads of other different scenes of music that was going around, and we were just putting that on that platform. And all of a sudden there'd be like, no word of a lie, there'd be like 3 or 4 people that would just, one in Canada, I remember we talked about that came back and said, I really like your track, what you just put up, really made my day. And there'd be another one from, I don't know where, you know, there was far and few between. But those 3, imagine going from 0 to 3. I mean, they're the most important numbers. I think anybody will tell you that. You can go from 1 million to 1.5 million is much easier than going from 0 to 3, because you're going from nothing. You're finding that first, you know, batch of people.
It's never going to feel as good as that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So those first 3 that came out of absolutely nowhere and took their time to write to us on that small platform back in that day saying, we love what you're doing. I remember we just sat in the studio in Manchester going like, wow, this is Canada? Really? Are you serious? You know, we've just got to Canada, one person. Yeah. And that changed everything. From that moment, we had that relationship with that person. You know, we had that fan, or we had that person going, we really like what you're doing. And that meant everything to us. And it's never gone away since. It's just like, no matter how big or small your audience is, that is your core. That's what you're about. That's what you're here.
So you're thinking that if there's 3 people that think we're doing cool stuff, they've got to represent a certain percentage. So there's got to be more than 3 people out there that will be equally as into our music as these 3 guys. So how do you multiply that? How did you then get to that point where you start to get more and more followers coming and listening to what you're doing?
I think we stayed in lane. We just, I don't think we particularly analysed the exact people, as in we were a new band. In fact, even back then, you wouldn't really analyse your audience. We just did our thing and was over the moon that 3 people wanted to hear our next thing. And that's why those people were so important, because, you know, we'd go like, oh, write a song and those 3 people are going to hear it. And we'd make a piece of imagery. And I think the growing it was just staying in lane and consistently putting up things that kind of got our story across more and got what our band was about. I remember when we got a lot of interest from record labels, and they were saying it was, for them, it ticked all the boxes because our imagery was correct, and it wasn't correct. We made it ourselves on Photoshop. We'd never studied Photoshop. We did like a kind of cut and paste thing, which at the time probably felt quite fresh, but that was just because that's the only way we could, you know, do our imagery without any knowledge of graphic design or things like that. I think it was just the honesty of it just cut through. I think people, even if you don't spell it out to them, they instinctively know. Like we learned later on in our careers, when there's a marketing campaign underneath it that is very overthought and almost diluting down what you want to get across because too many cooks in the kitchen, that type of thing. So yeah, it's people instinctively know when something's quite honest.
So that's always a really, you know, the success, whatever comes after, is great, and you can adapt with that, and you can use it. But if you don't have that really honest center core about what you're doing,
The essence of it. It doesn't have to be a band that you're honest or you're like perfect and honest. Yeah. Just the essence of what you want to get across.
If you get that bit right, then the next bit makes more sense. You can perform better. You can live with your music. I mean, imagine here's an example. Imagine making a song that you come out of the studio and your manager or whoever's working, go, this is amazing. This is the biggest thing in the world. And you hate it and it goes big. That's got to be the worst case scenario. Every night you've got to sing what you don't like. How do you get through that for years? You know, that kind of thing. So it won't last unless from the beginning you've really got you set out on the table, whatever business you're in, you go, like, this is what I want to do. Yes, it's going to have things around it as we get bigger and things are going to change, but that core has to be there. If it's not, you've got to get that bit right before you can progress.
I love that. I mean, I think that expression, staying in lane, Katie, I think that summed it up brilliantly. You know, be true to yourselves, stick with what you know works, stick with your passion. But then, of course, you moved from those early days, you then get signed, don't you? Get signed to this huge label, and then everything changes because you've got all these very powerful people who apparently know much more than you know about your own music, trying to get you to change direction, do other things that must have felt very uncomfortable.
I mean, yeah, you know, you work with those type of labels, like, you know, we knew what we was getting into. We weren't stupid. I mean, I was quite young, I was about 23, but we weren't really naive to it. We knew what was involved in, you know, there's huge marketing campaigns, you're traveling all around the world. We signed to Sony, but it was also Sony Japan, Sony America, South America, every country. And it's just quite hard to grab hold of what you, for instance, if we made our second album and we have our little message that we want to get across and the way we want to come across, if you run that through 30 different marketing departments in different arms of Sony around the world, it's just not going to feel the same. And it's not their fault, it's just a big machine. And I think most marketing machines, in effect, would, even without wanting to, change the feel of something, especially with music that is very personal and is like the untangible. There's something untangible about music that makes people fall in love with it, or an artist, or a David Bowie, or a David Byrne. They're not perfect. It's not, you can't, if you wrote it down on paper, you probably would say, we don't want to work with that artist. But there's just something about it. And it's the same with a photograph or, you know, a band logo. It might not be perfect, but the whole thing together gives you a feel. And I think that untangible thing can get lost in marketing.
Yeah, and Kate's right, because, you know, anything corporate is trying to perfect it to maximize yield all the time. Because, you know, if you get it perfect, then you can sell more units. But, you know, that's like in, I don't know, if you, like Beatles records, the greatest thing about those Beatles records is the imperfections. In music is, you know, everyone's trying to make it perfect to sort of break that mold, know what the formula is, sell a load of units. And it's always having that battle. And
especially now, because it's gone even more, I would hate to be a new band at the moment, because it is like the whole, with social media, that the perfection is so done now that there's got, for us, it's got to come back to the imperfect being, you know, and it is coming back to that. It's not even like we're foreseeing anything. I'm sick of seeing filtered people that I don't even know what they look like, you know. You want to see the lines on someone's face and the pores on someone's skin, all those, even down to the way we look online, because otherwise it's just so sterile.
And it's an interesting paradox, because we live in a digitalized era. And yet, I mean, as you mentioned, you know, the Beatles' early records, and, you know, it was all done on 2 tracks or whatever. You'd know more about this stuff than me. Just saying that makes you aware of the fact I know nothing about recording music. But you know, that early stuff that we all love, the early Elvis stuff, the Beatles stuff, all that stuff, it still sounds great, even today. And, you know, you're right in the sense that it's finding that blend, isn't it, between adopting modern technology and, to your point, remaining true to what you believe in and the sound that you want to create. Trying to get that blend, that is the interesting paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Because those records were honest. Forget the stars. Forget how famous certain people are. That's just a kind of like, what's the word? That's kind of just like the fallout of something good. Some people get, like Elvis became just a phenomenon, as the Beatles did. And there's some other bands that weren't as big, but they were as honest, you know. But everything you're talking about is the honesty of the music, the integrity of the commitment let's say, of the songwriting or the production. Now, that's not saying that modern producers or modern musicians aren't committed, and they are just in love with what their art form is. It's just that there's less time and less money or less, you know, opportunity to be that honest now, because you can get there so much quicker. Well, as humans, we'd always take the easy option. We always do. We don't really want to go traipsing up and down to go and milk the cow. We'd better just get a bottle out of the fridge. You know, it's that kind of, that's where the world is, and for the digitalization of the world, etc. But it's still, if you do look at the stats and you really kind of study music, not that that's the bee's knees of everything that goes on in the world, music, but that's what we do. It's still that integrity and that honesty. It still outshines when you have even a digital brand new artist that's recording massive hits in their bedroom on their laptop. They don't even get out of bed. You know, it's a different type of thing to the Beatles. But those people that are really deep inside what they're doing and they're really honest about it, it still hangs around longer than some stuff that's produced by 14 producers, and it's really designed just to make a quick buck.
By numbers.
By numbers. And it's that thing that I think for our band, just going back to your early question, to be able to still be doing what we do, to make records, to put records out, be it on our own label or licensing through majors around the world. I think it's that attitude that gives us the ability to just carry on doing it, or our fans at least put up with us, because, you know, we're always producing or writing stuff that when they get it, even if it's changing direction in terms of our music style or look, it's still coming from our hearts. And I think that's felt.
And how many followers, guys, do you now have on, say, Twitter, for example? I mean, I remember it seemed to be extraordinary when we were speaking about it.
Well, we're a bit slow on recent social media because we've gone kind of back into bubble form. When we came off major labels, we opened our own record label and publishing, and we kind of went independent as much as possible. So we licensed to all these different territories. So our audience is fragmented over different platforms, because some of the platforms came later in our career.
So it goes with like the age demographic of certain parts of our audience as well.
So where there's a younger audience, like for example, Instagram is probably something in the last 4 years that really, or maybe longer, don't quote me on that, it's become a phenomenon. We were kind of already had our big time for 4 or 5 years prior to Instagram happening.
Which is more on our Facebook.
So yeah, so we kind of like, I know, like 8-9 million maybe on our Facebook. I don't know, and then on our
kind of spread across them. There's probably about 1 million. I mean,
yeah.
But we're funny because we don't analyze. Like, I think if we analyzed, I think on our second album, literally there was some kind of marketing that went on where they would analyze reactions to anything what was said. I think we had one meeting about that. I thought that is not the way that we can live our lives as musicians, because we're not actresses or actors. We are, our music is us. So any comments, like hugely personal, if it's, you know, pulling you apart, because it's not a character. So we said we never wanted to analyze whatever we said or whatever we did kind of that severely. So we just post now. We don't even particularly watch the numbers. You know, people will come and go.
And it's interesting that you use, as you've just said, depending on the demographics, you're using different media channels. So you break it down, you look at age groups, demographics, and you think that works for this country, this age group, this demographic, and you switch it around. Now, I wanted to ask you a question, Jules. We were talking last week about that very inspiring journey where you took the wheel of the bus and you were listening to the radio. This is when you had your first #1, which is a brilliant story. I just wondered if you could just tell everybody about what happened and that moment that changed your lives.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, I mean, that's a tough one, Paul, because as we did discuss it last week, it was something quite private. I'm not sure we can air that story.
Okay. No, I meant
there's a lot of when you put records out, the public realize there's a lot of stuff that goes on before a record comes out when you're signed to a label. That's
I was making reference to the fact that the mix that had been put together, the one that the radio one we're using, wasn't the one you were very happy about, and you wanted to use your original.
Yeah. So you know, when you go through and you sign a record label, you have as Kay said, a lot of people telling you what the mix should sound like all of a sudden. We'd finished our record and it was getting played on XFM load of underground stations in the UK. And then you sign a label and everyone's going, right, we've got to make this record sound proper. And we were like, well, what's wrong with the job we've done? What's wrong with all the gigs we've been playing that everyone seems to be like jumping up and down, having a great time, and we feel honest about it. Oh, no, that can't be the record. We've got to make a proper record. So you are inexperienced and you don't want to rock the boat because you feel like you're, going from A to B in life. And the story there is, the mix is done by a professional mixer, that's very well known, and we get on with it to this day. We still get on with him, and it just doesn't test well. Once it's delivered and you're driving up and down the country doing your little promo gigs and starting off thinking, oh wow, we're a proper band now. People are talking about us, and the radio is starting to play a record. And we heard it on the radio. We heard our mix, and it sounded awful. Predominantly because we were mixing at the time in mono, because we didn't know how to mix in stereo. That's just a technical thing, stereo, everybody thinks stereo is an easy thing to do. It's not. You've got to put like drums on the left or right. And of course, getting that dynamic right in a mix is very difficult. And we didn't know how to do that. It wasn't like we were being smart. We just did what Eddie Cochran did back in the 2-track days of straight down the middle mono, and we couldn't make it sound any better than our mono mix. Yeah. So when we had a stereo mix, a professional LA, if you want, mix, it just lost all its power and punch. And we're sitting on a motorway, I think it was the A1, driving from maybe even been cockpit in Leeds, coming down to London or whatever way we were going. And our track came on Radio 1, and it sounded really, really, really bad. It sounded like we'd lost every bit about the musicality of it. Couldn't hear the track properly. We heard Katie's vocal screaming, "That's not my name," all through the 3 minutes, and Kate was like, "Turn that off." So we basically got our demo mix. It cost us, our mate mastered for like 15 quid on his own laptop, and we switched them. We were like, "You got the wrong mix," and of course the demo mix went out days later, and it was #1 2 weeks later in the UK. So again, always going back to that same thing, Paul. I mean, we'll drive this home as much as possible. Building a fan base, using all the social media we've got now by telling people what we're doing. There's different platforms for different audiences, as you said, but always the core is the honest. If we record a track in 25 minutes and we think, we can't put that out. It's only 25 minutes of work we spent on that, doing, the drums, the guitar, and boom. But we can't stop playing it. We love it. That's it. If you love it, you're done. That's what our fans want to hear, or that's what we want our fans to hear.
So it's about. I mean, this is right back to the earlier points you guys were making about staying in lane. Ironic, because you were driving a bus at the time, but staying in lane and being brave and sticking to your guns, despite the pressure that you were under, and just making sure that you remained authentic. And this is, when I relate this, as I'm sure Howard will sort of jump in a second, when we talk about the recruitment people, the people that own recruitment businesses, run recruitment businesses that are listening now, just getting that, as you said earlier, that core element to what you do, to stick true to your beliefs, to be passionate about what you do, being authentic. Those things remain at the heart of what you've always done and you continue to do today. And I think there's a relevance between what you've achieved and how you've stuck to your guns, so to speak, a relevance to the way other people that are listening run their businesses. Because at the end of the day, people, as it were, buy people. They buy, and we often talk about that thing about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So creating those early followers and expanding by remaining true to your beliefs has been sort of very much part and parcel of your journey over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally. And by the way, staying true to your beliefs doesn't mean doing one thing and never doing anything else. It just means it coming from you, because we also change direction. Inspiration changes over the years. We meet or hear other artists or other forms of ways of playing guitar or drums. And of course, that changes maybe the way our music develops. That's natural development. So staying true to oneself is also about taking risks, because you have a hit record and you're all over the world on a massive album, and you've got to make another one, right? And that second album, for us, it was like, we can't make the same album again. I can't just do a duplicate of the same album. Of course, everybody else just wants the same again because it's selling. And we had to make that decision. That decision is like, well, you know, do we want to still be doing this, you know, 5 albums later, or able to do it? Or are we going to be washed up because we're just listening to everybody tell us what we should be doing next? And of course, we took a turn. We were like, right, this is what we want to do. We moved to Berlin against everybody's odds, and we made those decisions. And you know, we're still here. This is not about how many more records we could, or we didn't, or we did, or sell, or whatever. It's the fact is that we are still able to walk into a studio together as a band, make music, absolutely adore it, and be really excited about the way we're going to put it out, be it changed the way we put it out, what we did 15, 12 years ago. So staying true is number one, being honest, number one. But that also means sometimes, like you said in your intro, taking a step back. Yeah. That's really tough, because you know that we could probably go in the studio tomorrow and rattle off "That's Not My Name," or a replica of "That's Not My Name," or "Shut Up and Let Me Go," or one of those. You know, we had 4 big hits on that first album, our biggest hits. Yes. We could easily go in there and say, "Oh, you know what? Let's just like rework it." You know what I mean, kind of thing. Yeah. But we've never done that, and I think if we had have done that, I don't think we would be even got to our 2nd or 3rd album.
Well, I mean, I think this is a really interesting point, because, of course, the whole world is at this weird situation, this awful situation, this pandemic, and it's you know, we're once again here we are in the UK in lockdown for several more weeks, and I think it's allowed in a weird way, an unexpected way, people to step back and look at what they'd been doing, running their businesses up to this point, and it's given everybody a chance to take a breather and think, what was working, what wasn't working, what's going to work in the future, how do I change, how do I evolve, how am I going to come out of this situation stronger than when I went into it? And I think when I look at, as a sort of lover of music, when I look at the music industry, it's constantly changing. As you've used the word evolving, it constantly evolves. And in our industry, we're at this point now where we are, as an industry, changing very rapidly. It's been a real shove forward in terms of change. You guys, I get the sense, embrace change. You love change. You find it stimulating. It's not something you've just referred to. You don't want to keep doing the same things over and over. What's the stimulus for you in terms of the change, and what does it do for you? Does it give you a sense of fear? Do you feel excited, exhilarated? What does it make you feel when you decide, look, we're going to do something different?
We always used to say, when we first started our band and we went on our first tours, and we were the first band on stage, that's like, you don't get any sound check, you don't get any lights, you know, you don't get a rider, you got no space to sit at the back and have a beer before you go on. You're the first band on, unfortunately. All those bands are like the underdog. You're coming from nothing. There's no support, there's no funding. You're literally, you have to set your own, you've got no tour manager, you've got no manager. And it's a beautiful place to be. It really is, as a new band, because you go on that stage as the underdog. It's like anything. And then you kick ass. It's a better shine than even being at number 1. I can tell you that now, because you get up there and then the main band's going up. They were bloody good, weren't they? You know, that feeling is just in anything, in sport, in anything. You come from here and you shine. Wow, that's a big feeling. I think we've always been in love with that motion, and I think that becoming top of your game and stuff is a wonderful thing to have. But I think the root of any creative or business or anything is that beginning moment, and I think you've got to keep in touch with that. Yeah. And I think when you ask a question about change, I think that's what motivates us. So we can deconstruct things, because we feel that if we don't, we're just going to get left behind. Now, whether or not that makes us as successful in the new way of doing things each time, I'm not sure whether that's relevant. What's relevant is we're still here, which means that we look at a way we're going to put a record. We've got a new record we're making for next year. We've got our own record label, publisher we license around the world to majors that help distribute, because we can't get to Japan, let's say, for example, manage things as well as some of these corporate or major labels can. So we license out to get some of their assistance. but our new record is going to come out in a completely different. I'm not sure we can talk about how we're going to release that record. Are we able to do that, or is that not? But it's going to come out in a completely different way again. It's not going to even come out the way we put our last record out. There are risks in doing that. Why? Because the way we did our last record, you know, using the Spotify's, and I'm not saying they won't be involved, but there's a kind of a platform that's quite traditional now, the way you released your music, digitally, by the way. We're going to change that up a little bit, you know, and our fans are going to feel that next year. They're going to go, really, that's how you're going to get your record out? I never thought of that. And it's just the way we feel that if we don't do that, I'm not sure whether there'll be another record from the Ting Tings in the not too distant future, just putting it out on YouTube, you know, whatever, YouTube, and sitting there on Spotify, and I hope this works. Part of the whole process is to sort of think, well, if the world is moving forward all the time, I'm not saying we know what the next answer is, because if we all knew that, we'd all be winning the lottery every time. But I mean, you know, it's being a part of that world that's changing. So we've got, you know, we all naturally feel like if we don't make that change, I don't think we feel as if we're innovative as we should be.
And this is a good point, that, you know, it's not just about selling records, so to speak, but it's also about self-fulfillment, isn't it? I mean, I think it has to be about you guys feeling, as the people listening must feel, that you're stretching yourselves, that you're taking on new challenges, you're doing things differently, you're learning and so forth, that you're not repeat, which is, you know, can be very debilitating in any business, whether it's, you know, the music industry or the recruitment industry. Just doing the same things over and over, as Einstein says, isn't necessarily going to help you develop your business. It's the insanity, isn't it?
That's right, Paul, because we do that constantly, don't we? To get good at what we do, we practice and practice and practice, and we go over and over and over. We do that. Anybody that's doing anything, business, got a new idea, you just keep going over. So we do that naturally. So why do that? If you're doing that in the process of being creative, or coming up with your business idea or your model, or writing a song, why would you do that on the other side of it as well, where you're just going like, right, this is how we're going to put it out, and we're going to play it like this every time. You're going to walk to the left and shout to your... If you do that, if everything becomes so repetitive, we're just robots, and it just ends up that you get shunted along because you're an old robot and a new robot, because anyone can just take that place. Again, it's to stay in any game, to stay relevant, to stay able to be doing what you're doing. And some of that becomes, I think, fruitful, really fruitful, because you know, it's like if you've got a good product or whatever it is, you do really well. Some bits not so fruitful, because maybe you don't have the product. We've got to remember, sometimes it's not just about being motivated, it's about having the goods, right? Because if people like what you're doing, they like what you're doing. But I do think, regardless of whether you're able to get that model right and sell, let's call it a product, for the worst word I can use for music, but regardless if you get the product perfect, the intent, the content, the intent about what you're doing, I think if that's right, you can afford to have hits and misses, because that's just the way it is, isn't it? You've got a new business, you're a shoe business, or you're doing something. You're not going to get every single shoe, style, design perfect. Yeah. Impossible. The greatest designers in the world, it's hit and miss, because or even business ideas, they're not always perfect. But if your core is perfect, if you really mean what you're doing, you can carry all that way, because you'll go with the flow of it. And, you know, please be to God, so you get some of it right.
I mean, when you were touring, you had a group of people working with you, and a large number of employees, people that were helping you, you know, tour all over the world. How important was it for you two guys to make sure that your team were always looked after, taken care of, supported by you?
Hugely important, massively important for us.
It now.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, because of the COVID, a lot of them are going through quite hard times, because the whole touring sector's gone, and that just shows you how important they were to us, because we're talking about 15 years worth of career for the band, and we still speak to each one of them, every one of them. I only haven't worked with them for the last 2-3 years, because we were still doing shows 2-3 years ago. But they're all really great friends of ours. We work with some of them in different capacities. I think that shows, you know, when you have a relationship over 15 years of touring with people, that you still speak to them, even as a friend, on a friend base, how important they were to us. To have, and they were the same people. I mean, in fact, yesterday we had a a Zoom call with one of our, he actually started touring with us right at the beginning. He came to the first UK tours, just us three, us two and him, you know. He's married and had 2 kids now. We were on the phone to him yesterday. That's 15 years. He toured with us consistently. We built a team around us three, then there was 4, then there was 5, then there was 6. And it was paramount, you know, that in terms of getting on the road and making that thing happen on the road, which now involves a lot more people than just me and Katie sitting in the studio writing and recording. You're talking about all the equipment, the touring, the logistics. They're all so important to the second part of our career. That's once you've got your record right and people are listening to your music. Now you need to get around the world safely and be able to perform that. There's no way that happens without that core team. So that's immensely important to us. Still is today. We're not touring at the moment. I'm not sure whether we're going to go on tour next year. The times are hard at the moment to get back out on the road. But if we did go out on tour, we'd be sitting down with that team immediately, trying to work out how we're going to do it, and it'd be invaluable.
It's a kind of large family. You've got a family that you're taking care of, you're looking after, you're keeping engaged. And your point about working with you for a very long time, 15 years, is very valid, because people don't stay with an employer for that period of time unless they're very bought in to what you're doing and believe in you as well. Howard, I've been doing a lot of questions. I've been asking a lot of questions, and I've ignored you. My apologies. I'm sure you've got a few questions you'd like to put to the guys.
Well, I was thinking sort of more on the lines, Jules, is that as you've sort of, you had the big support from the big marketing companies, as you said there, and they were sort of marketing you sort of all around the world. When that support stopped, talk about how then you and Katie then started to grow your, fan base on social media, and what you did to make sure that when you released records that you were turning your fan base into actually paying clients, as so to speak.
Okay, so there's so many variants of that. First, listening to your audience about maybe what their desire, what they want, because the digital. Let's take touring out of the equation. Touring obviously is an obvious factor. Go to the cities that people are listening to your music and play a show and make sure that show is amazing. Enjoy it as much for yourself as the audience. That's a given. So that's out of the question at the moment, because there's no touring now. So taking touring away, that's a really big part about what we do. Touring is going, like I said, getting into a town where loads of people listen to your music. You can't beat that. People want that badly. Our fans love us turning up and playing those songs. Outside of that, listening to, going online and saying to yourself, like, let's see, our last record was independent. It was on our own label, which means a lot more work, because obviously a major record company will take care of all the admin, and you can just concentrate on playing the drums and being in the studio. So taking on board running your label, there's a lot of admin, i.e. setting things up, making sure the record's delivered on time and the video's delivered and produced. And there's a load of stuff. But fundamentally, listening to your audience and figuring out that there was a big part of our audience that wanted vinyl, and making sure that we made quality vinyl. We got it printed or pressed at the right place. And I know it sounds not like it's like anything. If you make flimsy vinyl, people are buying really rubbish vinyl and rubbish, print and the artwork. Like having to organize all that, making sure you're getting the right pressings. And then we did something which was quite nice on the last record, where everybody that bought vinyl, we set up a system where their address would just come through a printer. So it literally printed off the label. And we had all the vinyl sleeves and all what they call what you send the vinyl in, like a postal thing that you can put the vinyl and stick them down and put it in the post. We actually created our own production line in an apartment that we lived in London. So what happened is that the records would arrive, the packaging would arrive, and any time someone bought the record, the label would print on our printer. And we had like a couple of helpers in the studio who were working, and they'd literally put the record in the sleeve, if you want, or in the postal thing, fold it, and we'd stick the label on it, and we'd take it down to Co-op, and they'd like literally, I'm not kidding, went back to basics, and they'd scan it, and that would go off to Japan or America or all over the world. And it was all just through PayPal. And that was listening to our audience, because our audience was going like, well, how can we get a vinyl? Who's the label? And how do we do this? And there's no record stores, and it's complicated. And we were like, well, make it really easy. You just press this button and you pay like $10 and the record would turn up in 2 weeks. And literally PayPal would ping, and that would pay for the people helping us make, you know, put the package together. It's almost like going back 30 years, you know, in an old way of like packaging things. So that really helped, because you saw people going like, my record's arrived. It's absolutely amazing, thick vinyl. It's like, we don't get that anymore unless you know a great record store, which are far and few between nowadays. You know, even Amoeba in LA has just moved its location. That was an amazing record store, by the way. But, you know, going to a record store and picking those great records, we were giving a little bit of that to our audience. So that helps. That makes people go like, oh, you guys are amazing. Being honest all the time on your socials to your fans. When you come off a major record company, you know, don't try to sort of like go like, oh, money in the world, we'll be taking 15 trucks across the desert next week, and we'll be setting up. It's like, well, we can't do that anymore. We don't have that infrastructure, but we can do this. And you'd be surprised how your fans go like, actually, I like that better. That's really cool, you know. And also just, you know, being one-on-one with your fan base a bit more. When you're on a corporate label, when you're on a big major record company, you're moving so fast, you're missing chunks all the time because you can't keep up. When you're not on a major, you're moving much slower. You have a lot more time for your audience. So it's an important. Maybe the numbers don't grow as fast because you just can't turn them over, but they mean a lot more to us. That's for sure.
And that says that you're listening to your audience, doesn't it? That says you're constantly reaching out and asking questions, as it were, of your audience, listening to what they want and respecting their wishes and appealing and doing something for them that's personal. There's a lot in there. I know from our conversations that you guys are really into detail, very detail oriented, very much about creating amazing value. And that description says that you've got your ear to the ground. You're very aware of what your people, your audience, your fan base are looking for from you.
Yeah, I mean, that is true, but I also think we don't overstay our welcome all the time. I think posting and selling and shoving stuff in people's faces on their phones is also a bit disconcerting. So I think there's a balance, you know, there's a balance to like say to your audience, we're here, we're creating something we really like, we hope you're going to like it, but not stuffing it down their throats with all these different platforms. That's also an important thing, going back to Howard's question about what's important coming off a major. And being independent is not acting. Majors push hard, you know. They use all these different avenues to sell the music. And I think when you're independent, you have to learn. You have to know when to push or how to push. You have to be a bit more respectful, because you're on a one-to-one basis with your audience, and they don't want to see you to be, you know, flooding through every bloody time to put the phone on and the TV's on there. You are going, hey, we don't buy a record. I think when you become an independent artist, yeah, it's a different set of rules. And I think just on Howard's question, just that's a big change in the way we do things. It's just been a little bit more delicate and understanding with your audience.
So I think looking at what you said there was, you know, it was interesting that you said, yeah, you're one-on-one, you know, back to your fan base, because obviously you're not producing records all the time and pushing records out to them all the time. So when you're sort of going to that one-on-one on your fan base, what are you talking to your fan base about? What are you doing to sort of carry on to make sure that your honesty and your integrity, as you keep talking about, is kept at the forefront of your marketing strategy, to ensure that when you do have a product, that they come and look and say, actually, yes, we want to press that PayPal button and off we go?
Howard, I think it's a really, really important question. I actually think the answer to that is what you don't do. I know that may not be relevant for all bands, okay, because there are poppier bands than us that need to be doing a lot more, because their sustainability is based around how much social media numbers they get in a day. It's important for them. I don't know what that is. We're a musical band. I think it's a lot about what you don't do, i.e., we make a new record, we change our scenery. We've done it again on our new record. We've moved to an island to make this record. And I think when we start getting in a position where we're ready to start playing that record, we tell our audience. We're honest. We give them the stuff we're doing. We tell them how we're doing it. We're telling them our news. You know, we can't give away too much right now because we're not ready to start telling people about what we're going through and how we're making this record. But that's the thing. We wake up and we start saying, right, you know, we are making a record. We've got something to say. And I think our audience appreciate that we say things when we've got something to say and not just say things all the time because we feel it fills the gaps. I think that's really important. And maybe if it's more, if you're more affluent or you're doing more, I mean, it's our 5th album. We've been together for 2008. So, well, you do that calculations, you know, maybe we could make more albums. I don't know. Maybe we'd have more to say, but for the Ting Tings, if there's a lull because we're not making a record or because we're struggling to make a record because we don't know what kind of record we want to make or because we're personally living our lives trying to sort lives out like everybody does, I'm not sure whether there's something we need to say about that. I think our audience aren't fooled to us to going, oh, by the way, we've got nothing to give you, but you never guess what happened today. I only swung off a bench today. And you know, I'm not sure whether our audience and us have that type of relationship. I think they think we're as honest as we can be. And I think that's really important because when we do have something to say, it's lovely to see that all that audience enjoy it rather than disappear going, oh no, we haven't heard you from 6 months, see you later. That's not saying that we don't say anything within a 6-month period that we're you know, trying to get inspiration about writing a record. But again, it's a complicated question in many ways as an artist, because obviously we want to be there for our audience all the time. But I think when there's nothing to say, don't try and say something that doesn't mean anything. Does that make sense? It's like, I'm not saying disengage with your audience, because it would be wrong to not be there at all for 5 years, which we're lucky we write a record maybe every 2-3 years. And then in that process, there's touring it, performing it, making videos. So each record can last 1.5 years. So really, you're only a year and a bit in the studio creating the next record, if that makes sense. But yeah, you know, you can talk about like we're about to do. Yeah, we're back in the studio. We're doing stuff. We're doing it from here. But saying stuff when you're not doing a record and just trying to invent stuff just to try to keep your fan base there, I think that in our experience, drives that fan base away.
So what you're saying is then your honesty is about only posting out when you actually have something to say, but what you're actually saying is you're going to drip feed those posts all the way through the creation period to the sale point. So it's not you know, I always say people don't go onto social media to actually buy anything. People go onto social media to learn things and find out things, what's actually happening. And that social media of drip of what you're doing, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to just doing. And you're almost sort of subliminally sort of pulling them in, feeding them in with the journey that you're going to get to the end of that journey, and then say, right, now here's the record, now buy the record, because they've been on that journey with you. And I always say that sort of, you know, if you're planning, I thought as a kid, you know, when we were planning holidays, being part of that initial plan was really the exciting part, and then the journey was the exciting part, and then you get there and you know what's happening. And I think that's the bit that, to me, social media should be about. It's that all. Get them involved in the whole planning, get them involved in actually understanding what you're trying to get to. And then the sale becomes so much easier at the end of that period because people already know what you're doing and they feel bought into your product rather than sort of alienated from your products. As you're saying, a lot of bands are now just sort of chasing numbers. What you're saying is grow the right number of followers that will then buy your product and keep those followers fed with the right information. And if you've got nothing to say, then you're probably best off not saying anything, but you still need to sort of keep your marketing sort of fresh to a degree.
Yeah, yeah. There's the sale point about that is a tricky one. As artists that are quite adamant about creating something that's loved by us and then hopefully loved by our fans, the sale element to that at times is icky, and it doesn't really fall into a marketing strategy from us. Strategy, I've always said that word wrong, haven't I? Yeah, so it's kind of like something we can't think about. I know that doesn't sound very businesslike, and it's not probably a great thing for people to hear, but me and Kate have never sat down and written a song and thought, oh, I know what we're going to do with this. We're going to, you know, fishing line out, we'll hook them in on this and we'll tell them how. I'm not sure that's the kind of way we can do things, although I do understand that inevitably there's a journey. Writing an album, getting ready to tour an album, that is a journey in itself. Social media gives us the opportunity to show that journey in various ways, and being creative about the way you show that journey, we're all for. You know, we love that. But I just don't know how. It's not a drop point for us. We don't have like me and Katie certainly don't with our label sit there and go, and that'd be the drop point. We get all that, and here comes the album. I'm not sure that works for us. I think what happens for me and Katie is first of all we have to battle about what kind of thing what we're going to make, what record we're going to make, why we're going to make it, what we're saying with this record, who are we inspired by. There's a massive journey there, and I think our audience, as you said, Howard, being a part of that is wonderful. In fact, it inspires us because, you know, sitting in the studio every day on your own going, I can't get this bass line right, this lyrics sucks or whatever, having like audiences reacting to having audience. Sorry about that. That's our new backing list. Having mini ting. A mini ting, yeah. So having like some type of end goal would distract us too much because there's so much going on in the creative. However, you're absolutely right. That journey is definitely something we love our audience to be a part of because they inspire us. On, you know, going through that process, there's a comment here and a comment there. Like, I'll give you an example just on that inspiration. I can't give you names or anything, but our fans write to us consistently about something that's happening in their day or something we done that touched them musically. I can't tell you how moving that is. Like, whether it's somebody that was going through not such a good time and our record helped them through it, whether someone's going through a great time and our record was just the icing on the cake for a party, or whatever. It's as mundane or as serious as the matter was, each time someone writes to us, it's really powerful. It's super, super powerful. So imagine you're going through a journey of trying to write a song or album. It's okay writing one song. You've got to write 12. You've got to write, it's like writing a book. The whole thing's got to make sense for us. And then you've got people writing to you through that process, through that up and down process. That journey with the audience is paramount. That's not for sales, not to make some classic, you know, virtual programming that people are going to go, oh, this is a great TV show. You know, not for that. Just for the existence between two formats, which is a band making music and an audience listening to music. But just to get, oh God, we're running out of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I wanted to say to you guys, thank you so much for giving up so much of your time today. It's been terrific. It's been incredibly enjoyable. There's thinking. And we really appreciate it. There's some brilliant takeaways from today. And, you know, not least, remaining authentic and your recent experiences of, you know, managing your own business, of being agile, being able to react to your audience, to do things in a very detailed way, to be listening to your audience. This last section's been particularly fascinating, but also staying true to your roots, talking about how you started, the passion you've had over the years for your music and how it's constantly evolved and changed and how you embrace change. And you're not frightened to take risks, which I think is a really big lesson for all of us. And I just want to say thank you to both of you, to all three of you actually.
I'll bring you in for a little hello.
Yeah, and we look
I couldn't get off my boob, so I didn't want it to be that kind of video, to be honest. I was like, but we tried multitasking.
well,
There's nothing to say we don't keep it real.
Thank you so much, guys. And
That's the honesty in the whole, you know, the underlining point about this whole thing is being as honest as possible.
but thanks, guys. Thank you again. And we want to thank everybody for listening today. And Howard, I'm going to let you just wrap up and just briefly talk about next week. But thank you again, Jules. Thanks, Katie. Thank you for all your time today. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Jules. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Mini Ting. Much appreciated for your input there. I think as we move on, again, as we say, we do normally 4 webinars in a series, and this is the end of the social media webinars. Next week, we are moving on to business development, and we've got 4 really interesting projects really to sort of roll out to. The first will be all about planning and developing a business development strategy. The next one then will be, we're talking about, do you actually know what clients are buying, and are you selling what they are buying? From there, then we'll talk about how we challenge the big boys, what we do with our product, and how we can sort of develop our product. And the final one, we'll talk about the mindset of selling and what sort of mindset you need your people to be in to ensure that they engage in your customers correctly. So we're going to start moving on back into the pillars that we sort of worked for from a Jump's point of view, to make sure that we're covering the things that you need. We think as we come into December, building up for 2021, is really important to get your strategy right and get your development strategy right. And listening to some of the things that sort of Jules was talking about there, about sort of knowing your audience, that one-to-one with your fan base is really important, but taking them on that journey, I think, is really important. And your business development is all part of that process. So ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time. It's been much appreciated. Julie and KT, thank you much for your time. Very much appreciated. Uncle Jobs, thank you for your time. As always, it's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of this week's webinar, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody. Keep safe.